Lauren, my wife, had insisted, no, dragged me, to this rooftop party. One of those trendy, overly crowded, we're too cool for chairs kinds of gatherings where everyone laughs too loud and drinks too much. I wasn't exactly looking forward to it. Social events like that? Not my scene. But Lauren? She thrived in them, like a fish in water. And when she said, it'll be fun, what she really meant was, you'll tolerate it for my sake. So, there I was, whiskey in hand, leaning awkwardly against a railing and wishing I were anywhere else. I recognized most of the people there. Not because they were friends, but because Lauren made sure we went to enough of these that their faces were vaguely familiar. It was a mix of coworkers, old classmates, and plus ones who had stuck around long enough to earn their own invitation. Take Matt, for example. He'd only been part of this crowd for a few months. Nobody seemed to know where he came from. One day, he just started showing up. And somehow, within weeks, he was cracking jokes at the center of every group, basking in the kind of attention I didn't want but Lauren seemed to crave. Lauren, of course, was in her element. She floated from group to group, her laugh louder than the music, her hair flipping just the right way under the glow of string lights. She'd perfected the art of being seen. Megawatt smile, sparkling eyes, always the star of the show. For everyone except me. While she worked the room, I stayed in the background, sipping my drink and pretending not to notice the growing distance between us. But it was hard to miss. She was laughing with everyone else, smiling at everyone else. And when her phone, which was sitting on the table near me, started buzzing non-stop, I couldn't help but glance at it. It buzzed once, then twice, then again. I finally leaned over, just enough to see the screen light up. A message, another, and another. She wasn't exactly subtle about it. When she came back to grab her glass, I asked, "Who's texting you so much?" I kept my tone light, casual. She glanced at the phone, smiled, this sly, knowing smile, and flipped it face down before answering. "Work," she said, not even looking at me. "Work." I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "At this hour?" She sighed, finally meeting my gaze. The kind of sigh that made it clear I was already testing her patience. Not everyone clocks out at 5, Liam. I wanted to press further. My gut was twisting, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. But I let it go. I didn't want to make a scene. Not yet, anyway. And then it happened. The moment that would stick with me long after the party ended. Lauren stood up, her glass in hand, and tapped her fork against it. The room quieted, all eyes turning to her. She loved that, being the center of attention. I should have known whatever came next wouldn't be good for me. "To my husband, Liam," she began, smiling sweetly at me. For a brief second, I thought she might actually say something kind, something genuine. But no, of course not. The man who's reliable, dependable, and always consistent. Like a Honda Civic. The room erupted in laughter. I felt my face heat up, a mix of embarrassment and anger swirling in my chest. She wasn't done. "Not exactly exciting," she added, her smile widening. "But hey, he'll get you where you need to go." The laughter grew louder, and I felt like every eye in the room was on me, dissecting me, judging me. I gripped my glass a little tighter, my jaw clenched, but Lauren just kept going. And let's not forget his fascinating ability to turn any conversation into a lecture about tax deductions. Truly a man of many spreadsheet talents. That's when I knew it wasn't just a joke. It was a performance. A calculated move to put me in my place while she shined. And who was laughing the hardest? Matt, slapping the table like it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. He leaned over to me, still chuckling, and said, "Man, she's got you pegged, huh? Gotta love her sense of humor." Sense of humor. Sure. If publicly humiliating me was supposed to be funny, then I guess I'd missed the punchline. I leaned toward Lauren, my voice low and sharp. "What the hell was that?" "It was a joke," she said casually, swirling her wine like we weren't surrounded by people. "Relax. Publicly humiliating me is your idea of a joke?" "God, Liam," she snapped, rolling her eyes. "Stop being so sensitive. It's not that deep." But it was. It was that deep, and as I stood there, watching her brush me off like I was the one out of line, I knew something had shifted. Something I couldn't ignore. I'd love to tell you that I shrugged off Lauren's public roast like it didn't matter. That I went home, cracked open a beer, and let it all roll off my back. But that's not what happened. Her words stayed with me, playing on a loop in my head like an annoying pop song you can't escape. I couldn't shake the look on her face when she said it, or the way Matt laughed like he was in on some joke I didn't understand. I'd brushed off plenty of things Lauren said in the past, but this time it felt different. That night, as we drove home in silence, I caught myself glancing over at her. She was scrolling through her phone, smirking at something on the screen. She didn't look guilty. She didn't look remorseful. Hell, she didn't even look like she noticed I was there. When we pulled into the driveway, she got out of the car without a word, slammed the door behind her, and walked straight inside like I wasn't even worth a good night. I followed her in, tossing my keys on the counter and watching her grab a water bottle from the fridge. I finally broke the silence. "You want to tell me what that was about back there?" What was about?" she asked, leaning against the counter like she genuinely didn't know what I was talking about. "The toast. The phone." Matt laughing like an idiot the whole time. "Take your pick." She rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. "Oh my God, Liam. It was a joke. You're so dramatic. You called me a Honda Civic in front of everyone." "Well," she said with that infuriating smirk of hers, "you are reliable." It wasn't just the toast, though. It was the constant buzzing of her phone, the sly little smiles, and the way she acted like I didn't exist unless she was putting me down. Something wasn't right. It hadn't been right for weeks, maybe months, and I'd been too blind, or too stupid, to see it. Until now. Lauren's purse was sitting on the bed when I walked into our room. Her phone was sticking out of it, the screen lighting up with another message. I hesitated, staring at it like it might bite me. I'm not proud of what I did next, but something inside me snapped. I picked it up. Her passcode was laughably simple. I typed it in and held my breath as the phone unlocked. I told myself I'd just look at the messages, just enough to put my mind at ease. But what I saw didn't ease anything. It made everything worse. The most recent message was from Matt. "You were on fire tonight. Can't stop thinking about that dress." I felt my stomach drop, but I couldn't stop myself. I scrolled up, my hands shaking. There it was, a thread that went back weeks, maybe months. Messages that left no room for doubt about what was going on. This wasn't just friendly banter or casual flirting. This was something else entirely. "Matt, last night was amazing. I haven't stopped thinking about it." "Lauren, me too. Can't wait for the next time." My vision blurred as I kept scrolling. Each message was worse than the last, hitting me like a gut punch I wasn't prepared for. There were pictures too, selfies of them together, tucked away in a hidden album. One of them was from 2 weeks ago, the same day she told me she was stuck in back-to-back meetings. They were sitting in some little cafe downtown, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. But the final blow? A video. I didn't even press play. Just seeing the thumbnail, her leaning into him, laughing like he just said the funniest thing in the world, was enough. I copied everything to my phone, like a detective gathering evidence for a case I never wanted to solve. I set her phone down and sat on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands. My chest felt like it had been hollowed out, like someone had carved out everything inside me and left nothing but an echo. This wasn't just a fling. It wasn't a mistake. It was calculated, planned. And the worst part? She'd made me feel like I was the problem while she carried on behind my back. The bedroom door creaked open, and Lauren walked in, her expression shifting from annoyance to suspicion the moment she saw me sitting there. "What are you doing?" she asked, her eyes flicking to her phone. She knew. She could tell. I held up the phone, my hands trembling. "Care to explain this?" Her face hardened instantly. "Were you going through my stuff? Are you seriously turning this around on me right now?" I snapped, standing up. "How long, Lauren? How long has this been going on?" She crossed her arms, her smirk returning like armor. "Does it matter?" Something inside me broke. "Does it matter?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You've been sneaking around with him, and you have the nerve to act like I'm the one in the wrong?" She stepped closer, her tone icy. "Oh, please, Liam. Maybe if you weren't so boring, I wouldn't have needed someone else to remind me what fun feels like. That was it. I walked past her, grabbed a pillow and blanket, and headed to the couch. I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell. I just left her standing there, her phone still clutched in her hand. For the first time, I didn't feel like arguing. I didn't feel like fixing anything. I felt done. The next morning, the house was suffocatingly quiet. Not the comfortable kind of quiet, where you can enjoy a moment of peace, but the kind that presses down on you, heavy and thick. I was on the couch, staring at the ceiling, running through everything I'd seen on Lauren's phone the night before. It didn't feel real. None of it did. It was like someone had swapped out my life with some terrible soap opera plot. Lauren walked into the living room, still in her pajamas, clutching a mug of coffee like it was a shield. She looked at me briefly, then glanced away, her face blank. I didn't know if she was hoping I wouldn't bring it up, or if she just didn't care. Either way, I wasn't letting it slide. "We need to talk," I said, sitting up. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. She sighed dramatically, like I just asked her to run a marathon. "About what?" she asked, though I knew she already knew. "Don't play dumb, Lauren," I said, my tone sharp. "About Matt. About the texts. About all of it." Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I thought she might try to deny it. But instead, she shrugged, setting her coffee down on the table. "Fine," she said, crossing her arms. "What do you want to know?" The casualness of her tone made my blood boil. "I want to know how long this has been going on," I said, standing up. "I want to know how you thought you could lie to my face, humiliate me, and then act like I'm the one overreacting." She rolled her eyes, her lips curling into that infuriating smirk. "You're being so dramatic, Liam. It's not like I planned for this to happen. Don't you dare try to downplay this," I snapped, taking a step closer. "You didn't accidentally sneak around behind my back. You didn't accidentally humiliate me in front of our friends. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment mistake, Lauren. This was deliberate." She didn't flinch. Instead, she tilted her head, her tone dripping with condescension. "You're really blowing this out of proportion. People cheat, Liam. It happens. Grow up." Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. "People cheat?" I repeated, my voice rising. "That's your excuse? That's how you justify this? People cheat?" She shrugged again, and the sheer audacity of her casualness made my hands tremble. "Look, I wasn't happy, okay?" she said, as if that explained everything. "You were so busy being you. Reliable, predictable, boring. I needed something more." I stared at her, struggling to process what she just said. "So, what? You went to Matt? That smug, self-absorbed clown? He's your idea of something more?" Lauren's smirk faltered, but she quickly recovered. "Matt made me feel alive," she said, her voice defiant. "Something you haven't done in years." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Her words hung in the air, sharp and venomous, cutting deeper than I thought possible. "Do you even hear yourself?" I asked, my voice quieter now. "Do you even realize how ridiculous you sound?" She rolled her eyes again, leaning against the back of the couch. "You're just mad because you got caught up in your perfect little bubble, and now it's popped." That was it. I couldn't listen to another word. "You know what, Lauren? You're pathetic," I said, my voice steady now. "You want to feel alive? Fine. Go live your exciting, dramatic life with Matt. But don't you dare come back here and try to make me the villain in your story." Her smirk disappeared, replaced by something colder, angrier. "You think you're so much better than me, don't you?" she spat. "Newsflash, Liam, you're not. You're just a boring, mediocre man who thought he could coast through life and call it love." I shook my head, stepping back. "I'm not the one who threw our marriage away, Lauren. That was all you." She opened her mouth to respond, but I didn't give her the chance. I turned and walked out of the room, heading back to the couch. I didn't want to hear another word. Not from her, not about Matt, not about anything. I was done. For the rest of the day, we avoided each other like the house wasn't big enough for the both of us. She stayed in the bedroom, probably texting Matt or venting to Sarah, and I stayed in the living room, replaying every moment of our marriage in my head. How had it come to this? How had I not seen it coming? That night, I called Ryan. I needed someone to talk to, someone who wouldn't sugarcoat things or make excuses. When he picked up, I didn't waste time. "Lauren's cheating," I said, my voice flat. There was a pause on the other end, then Ryan let out a low whistle. "Damn," he said. "You sure?" "I saw the messages, Ryan," I said, pinching the bridge of my nose. "Texts, photos, everything. It's Matt." "Matt?" he repeated, his tone incredulous. "That guy's a walking red flag. You want me to come over?" "No," I said, shaking my head even though he couldn't see me. I needed to tell someone." Ryan was quiet for a moment, then he said, "Liam, listen to me. Don't do anything stupid. Don't confront Matt. Don't make a scene. Just be smart about this." "Smart?" I repeated, the word tasting bitter in my mouth. "Yeah, sure." But as I hung up the phone, I wasn't sure what smart even looked like anymore. The day after our confrontation, Lauren acted like nothing had happened. She went about her routine with an air of normalcy so artificial it made my skin crawl. She hummed while making coffee, scrolled through her phone at the table, and barely glanced in my direction. It wasn't guilt I saw in her. It was indifference. Like I was just some obstacle she'd sidestepped on her way to wherever she was headed. I spent most of the day in silence, avoiding her and the landmine of emotions swirling in my chest. But as the hours dragged on, one thing became clear. Lauren wasn't sorry. Not for the affair, not for the lies, not for humiliating me. If anything, she seemed irritated that I'd even brought it up. By the time evening rolled around, the tension in the house was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. "Are you going to sulk all day?" she finally asked, leaning against the doorway with her arms crossed. I looked up from the book I wasn't actually reading. "Sulk?" I repeated. "Is that what you think I'm doing?" She shrugged, her tone as casual as if we were discussing the weather. "What else do you call sitting around and brooding?" I closed the book and set it down, staring at her. "You cheated on me, Lauren. You lied to my face. I think I'm entitled to brood for a bit." Her lips twisted into a smirk, one-eyed groan to hate. "Oh, come on, Liam. Don't make this into some grand betrayal. Things happen. People make mistakes." I stood up, anger bubbling just beneath the surface. "Mistakes?" I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "A mistake is forgetting to buy milk. What you did wasn't a mistake, it was a choice. A series of choices." She rolled her eyes and leaned against the wall, arms still crossed. "Do you even hear yourself? You're so dramatic. I told you, I wasn't happy. You didn't exactly make it easy to stay faithful." That was her game, turning it around on me, deflecting, making me question myself. It wasn't the first time she'd done it, but this time, I saw it for what it was. Manipulation, plain and simple. "So, this is my fault now?" I asked, my tone icy. "I didn't say that," she said, though her tone said otherwise. "But if you'd paid a little more attention to me, maybe we wouldn't be here." I laughed, though there was no humor in it. "You're unbelievable, Lauren. You want to blame me for your choices? Go ahead. But deep down, you know this isn't about me. This is about you." She straightened up, her smirk disappearing for the first time. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you're selfish," I said, stepping closer. "You've always been selfish. You don't care about anyone but yourself, and you'll do whatever it takes to get what you want, even if it means tearing down the people who care about you." Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I thought she might lash out. But instead, she took a deep breath and shook her head. "You know what, Liam? Maybe you're right. Maybe I am selfish. But at least I'm honest about what I want. You're just a boring, predictable man who thinks showing up is enough." I clenched my fists at my sides, forcing myself to stay calm. "If I'm so boring, why did you marry me?" "Because I thought you'd be enough," she said, her voice cold. "But people change, Liam. I changed. You didn't." There it was, the cruel honesty I'd been bracing for. She didn't love me anymore. Maybe she never did. And now, she didn't even care enough to pretend. I shook my head, stepping back. "You're right, Lauren. People do change. And I've changed too. I'm not going to keep playing this game with you." She tilted her head, studying me like I was some puzzle she couldn't quite solve. What game? The one where you make me feel like I'm the problem, I said. The one where you get to cheat, lie, and manipulate, and I'm just supposed to take it. That game? It's over. Her smirk returned, though it was weaker now, less sure. Fine, she said, brushing past me toward the kitchen. If you want to act like the victim, that's on you. But don't expect me to apologize for being honest. Honest? I called after her. You don't even know what that word means. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her silence said everything. That night, I stayed up late, replaying the conversation in my head. She twisted everything, tried to turn her betrayal into my failure. And for a moment, just a moment, I'd almost believed her. That was the worst part. She was so good at it, so practiced, that even I couldn't tell where her lies ended and the truth began. But not this time. This time, I saw her for what she was. And I knew, without a doubt, that I couldn't keep living like this. Something had to change. The morning after that last argument, I woke up with one thought in my head. I needed to take control. For weeks, months, really, I'd been spiraling, reacting to Lauren's lies and manipulation like I was playing defense in a game I never signed up for. But not anymore. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for her to dictate the terms of my life. If she wanted a war, I'd fight smart. I'd fight quiet. And I'd make damn sure I came out on top. First, I called Megan. Megan was a lawyer I'd met through a friend years ago. At the time, she'd been helping him sort out a messy business deal, and I remembered being impressed by how ruthless she was, calm, collected, and sharp as a blade. Exactly what I needed. I didn't even hesitate before dialing her number. Liam, she said after I explained the situation, her voice steady and professional. I'm sorry you're going through this, but I can help. First things first, we need to gather everything. Bank statements, text messages, photos, any evidence that shows a pattern of infidelity or financial misconduct. The more documentation we have, the stronger your case will be. I'd already taken screenshots of Lauren's text with Matt and saved copies of the photos I'd found on her phone. Hearing Megan's calm, matter-of-fact tone made me feel a flicker of control, like I wasn't completely drowning anymore. I've got most of that already, I said. I can send it to you today. Good, Megan replied. And one more thing, don't confront her anymore. Let me handle this from here. The less you engage, the better. That was easier said than done. Lauren had a way of getting under my skin, and avoiding her while living in the same house was like trying to ignore a ticking time bomb. But Megan was right. If I wanted to come out of this intact, I had to be smart. Over the next few days, I followed Megan's instructions to the letter. I combed through our joint bank account, flagging every suspicious transaction. There were more than I expected, thousands of dollars spent at upscale restaurants, boutique shops, and even a weekend spa retreat I hadn't known about. Meanwhile, Megan worked on drafting the divorce papers, laying out a case that painted a clear picture of Lauren's betrayal and recklessness. Lauren, of course, had no idea what was coming. She still strutted around the house like she owned the place, flashing that smug little smile every time she caught me looking at her. If she noticed I was avoiding her, she didn't let on. And if she suspected I was building a case against her, she certainly didn't show it. The first time she realized I wasn't playing her game anymore was during one of her classic provocations. She walked into the living room one evening, phone in hand, and waved it at me like a trophy. Matt says hi, she said, her tone mocking. He thinks you're taking this all a little too personally. I didn't react. I didn't even look at her. Instead, I turned the page of the book I was pretending to read and said, "Good for Matt." That threw her off. She blinked, clearly expecting me to take the bait. When I didn't, she huffed and stomped out of the room, muttering something about me being boring as always. It was small, but it felt like a victory. She wanted a reaction, and I wasn't giving it to her. The first mediation meeting came quicker than I expected. It was me, Lauren, Megan, and Lauren's lawyer, a slick, over-polished guy named Bryce who looked like he'd stepped out of a TV courtroom drama. Lauren was in full performance mode, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue and talking about how much she'd sacrificed for our marriage. "I gave up my career," she said, her voice trembling with faux sincerity. I put everything into supporting Liam, and now he's trying to erase me from our life. Megan didn't even flinch. Could you clarify what you mean by sacrificed your career? She asked, her tone neutral but razor sharp. Lauren blinked, caught off guard. I mean, I could have had a real career if I hadn't spent so much time making our home a happy place. I couldn't help myself. I laughed, a short, bitter sound that made everyone turn to look at me. You've never held a full-time job for more than 6 months, I said, shaking my head. And as for our happy home, let's not forget who did all the cooking, cleaning, and bill paying while you were out with your friends. Or, let's be honest, with Matt. Bryce cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. Mr. Hayes, let's keep the focus on financial division. Gladly, Megan said, her voice icy. Given Mrs. Hayes's spending habits and lack of contributions to the household, we believe her claim to half of the marital assets is excessive. Lauren's face turned pale, but she quickly recovered, turning on the waterworks again. This is so unfair, she sniffled. Liam knew I wasn't happy, but he didn't care. He pushed me to this. Let me get this straight, Megan said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. You're claiming your unhappiness justified fraud, infidelity, and financial exploitation? Lauren sputtered. But Bryce cut in, his voice tense. We'd like to propose a settlement. Smart move. It was a few days after the mediation meeting when Matt decided to crawl out of the shadows. I should have known he'd make a move eventually. Guys like him always do. Too smug to stay silent, too arrogant to let things go. It started with a text from an unknown number. Hey man, can we talk? It's Matt. Seeing his name on my phone made my stomach churn. My first instinct was to delete the message and move on with my day. But something inside me, curiosity, maybe anger, made me reply. What do you want? His response came immediately, like he'd been waiting for me to bite. I think we need to clear the air. Let me swing by your place. I should have said no. I knew I should have said no. But the idea of facing him, of hearing whatever excuse or justification he had cooked up, felt oddly satisfying. I wanted to see him squirm. So I replied. Fine. Be here in 30. He arrived exactly on time, like he was showing up for a job interview. Same smug demeanor, same overconfident swagger. He was wearing one of those trendy leather jackets that looked too expensive and trying too hard at the same time. As soon as I opened the door, he gave me this ridiculous, overly casual grin. Liam, he said, holding up his hands like he was entering enemy territory. Thanks for agreeing to talk. I didn't respond. I just stepped aside, gesturing for him to come in. He walked in like he owned the place, looking around the living room as if it were a museum exhibit. I stayed silent, letting him stew in the awkwardness for a moment before crossing my arms and finally speaking. What do you want, Matt? He sighed dramatically, running a hand through his hair like he was the one who'd been wronged. Look, man, I know things are tense between us. Tense? I interrupted, my voice sharp. You slept with my wife, Matt. Tense doesn't even begin to cover it. He winced, probably more at my tone than my words. Yeah, I screwed up. Big time. But it's not what you think. I raised an eyebrow, my patience wearing thin. Oh, really? Then why don't you enlighten me? He took a deep breath, clearly gearing up for what he thought was a heartfelt confession. Lauren came to me first, he said, his voice low and dramatic. She told me she felt trapped, like she couldn't breathe in your marriage. I didn't plan for anything to happen. It just did. I let out a bitter laugh. Wow, that's some beautiful storytelling, Matt. Let me guess. She told you I was boring, that I didn't appreciate her, and you thought you'd be her knight in shining armor? He shifted uncomfortably, his smugness faltering for the first time. It wasn't like that, he muttered. I mean, yeah, she said some stuff about you, but I didn't take it seriously. She just needed someone to listen. And you listened, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm, right into her bed. He held up his hands again, trying to look innocent. I'm not proud of it, okay? But Lauren, she's not who you think she is, man. She's a manipulator. She twists things, makes you feel like you're the problem. She did it to me too. I stared at him, stunned by the sheer audacity of his words. Was he seriously trying to paint himself as a victim? So let me get this straight, I said, stepping closer. You want me to feel sorry for you because Lauren played you like a fiddle? Newsflash, Matt. You're not the first guy to fall for her act, but you are the one dumb enough to think you could get away with it. His smirk was gone now, replaced by a look of unease. I just wanted to apologize, he said, his voice quieter. I never meant to hurt you. You didn't hurt me, I said coldly. You embarrassed yourself. And for the record, whatever sob story Lauren fed you doesn't excuse what you did. You knew she was married, Matt. You knew, and you didn't care. He opened his mouth to respond, but I didn't give him the chance. I grabbed a basketball from the corner of the room, the one I kept meaning to toss in the garage, and threw it at him. It wasn't hard enough to hurt, but the satisfying thunk as it hit him square in the chest was worth it. Get out of my house, I said, pointing toward the door. Matt stumbled back, clutching the basketball like it might explode. Dude, what the hell? Get out, I repeated, my voice low and steady, before I decide to throw something heavier. He muttered something under his breath but wisely backed away, his hands raised in mock surrender. All right, I'm going. But for what it's worth, Liam, you need to let this go. She's not worth all this anger. I didn't bother responding. I just stood there, watching as he walked out the door with his tail between his legs. That night, I called Ryan to tell him about the encounter. You'll never guess who showed up at my house today, I said, cracking open a beer. Let me guess, Ryan said. Matt? Bingo, I replied. What did he want? To clear the air, I said, laughing bitterly. Apparently, Lauren manipulated him too, and now he's just a poor misunderstood victim. Ryan snorted. Classic Matt. Let me guess. He gave you some half-assed apology and acted like he didn't know what he was doing. Pretty much, I said. And I may have thrown a basketball at him. Ryan burst out laughing. Man, I wish I'd been there to see that. Did it hit him? Right in the chest, I said, grinning. Perfect, Ryan said. That's the energy you need to keep, Liam. Don't let these clowns get to you. You're better than both of them. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like he was right. After the basketball incident with Matt, I started making some overdue decisions. The first one was simple. I was done with toxic people. Lauren, Matt, and their little enabler Sarah. They had no place in my life anymore. I wasn't going to sit around letting them poison my world any further. The house still felt heavy with the aftermath of everything, but clearing out the rot was as liberating as it was painful. Step one was Sarah. For years, she'd been a fixture in our lives. Lauren's confidant, partner in crime, and, apparently, the one who played matchmaker between Lauren and Matt. I blocked her number without hesitation. I didn't want her smug little messages or any faux concern laced with passive-aggressive digs. The same went for everyone else in our so-called friend group who had stood by silently, enabling Lauren's betrayal. I went down my contact list like a gardener pruning dead branches. By the time I was done, my phone felt lighter, and so did I. Lauren, though? She wasn't going quietly. She showed up a few days later, unannounced and uninvited, looking like she'd just walked off a runway. Her makeup was flawless, her hair perfectly styled, and her outfit screamed I'm thriving. She even carried herself with a confidence that bordered on arrogance, as if she believed she could waltz back into my life and charm her way into a reset. Liam, she said as I opened the door, her voice syrupy sweet. We need to talk. I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe, keeping my face neutral. We don't, actually. She tilted her head, that practiced, insincere smile never faltering. Come on, don't be like that. We were married for years. We can't just throw that away. I laughed, an actual laugh, sharp and bitter. You threw it away the second you decided Matt was worth more than your vows. So, forgive me if I'm not in the mood to play nice. Her smile wavered, just for a second, but she recovered quickly. I made a mistake, okay? I let things get out of hand, but that doesn't erase everything we had. I repeated, my voice cold. Past tense. What we had was a marriage. What you turned it into was a joke. Her jaw tightened, and the fake sweetness in her tone was replaced with a sharp edge. Do you even care about fixing this? Fixing this? I repeated, incredulous. You didn't come here to fix anything, Lauren. You came here because you're losing. You thought Matt was your golden ticket, and now you're realizing he's just another guy who uses people and moves on. That struck a nerve. Her expression darkened, and for a moment, I saw a crack in her composure. You think you're so much better than me, don't you? She spat. You're nothing special, Liam. You're boring. Predictable. The kind of guy women settle for, not the kind they want. Her words were designed to sting, but they didn't. Not anymore. Instead, they gave me a strange sense of clarity. This was who Lauren really was, a shallow, vindictive person who thrived on tearing others down. And for the first time, I wasn't letting her win. You're right, I said, smiling. I am boring. I work hard. I pay my bills. And I don't need cheap thrills or lies to feel alive. But you know what else I am? Free. Free of you, your games, and whatever drama you bring to the next guy who falls for your act. Her mouth opened as if to respond, but no words came out. For once, Lauren didn't have a snappy comeback. Her silence said more than her insults ever could. You can go now, I said, stepping back and gesturing toward the driveway. We're done here. She didn't move at first, her face a mix of fury and disbelief. But then, she grabbed her bag, her composure snapping like a rubber band. You'll regret this, she hissed, her voice venomous. You'll miss me when you're sitting here alone in your boring little life. I didn't flinch. Doubt it, I replied, and then I shut the door in her face. The house was eerily quiet after she left. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence sink in. It wasn't the suffocating quiet that had hung over the house for weeks. It was peaceful, liberating, the kind of quiet that meant I could finally breathe again. That night, I called Ryan. Guess who showed up today? I said, cracking open a beer. Lauren, he guessed immediately. Yep, I replied, sitting on the couch. She gave me the whole, we can work this out speech. When I didn't bite, she called me boring and pathetic. Ryan snorted. Classic Lauren. Let me guess. She left in a huff? Pretty much, I said. But for once I don't care. She can think whatever she wants. I'm done. Ryan's voice was warm, reassuring. That's the right move, Liam. Don't let her drag you down anymore. You've got a clean slate now. Use it. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I realized he was right. I wasn't just cutting ties with Lauren. I was cutting ties with the part of my life where I let people like her control me. I didn't know exactly what came next, but I knew one thing. It was going to be better than what I'd left behind. After Lauren's final stunt and the divorce papers were signed, my life shifted into a strange kind of calm. The chaos was over, the storm had passed, and I was left standing in the ruins of what had once been my marriage. But for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. The first thing I did was reclaim my house. It was small, but it felt like an act of defiance. I went room by room, clearing out every trace of Lauren's influence. The gaudy throw pillows, the overpriced candles she never lit, even the ridiculous decorative plates she insisted we hang in the dining room. All of it went. By the end of the weekend, the house looked emptier, but it felt more like mine. It was the first step toward rebuilding a space where I could breathe. Ryan showed up the following weekend with a six-pack of beer and a toolkit, declaring that it was time for a home improvement intervention. He walked into the living room, took one look around, and whistled. Man, this place looks like a dentist's waiting room, he said. No offense, but Lauren's taste sucked. None taken, I said, laughing for the first time in what felt like forever. What do you suggest? Let's make this place scream Liam, he said. No pastel throw blankets, no fake plants. We're talking leather couches, big-ass TVs, maybe a dartboard if you're feeling spicy. By the end of the day, we transformed the space. The pastel throw blankets were replaced with a sleek leather recliner. The walls, once covered in Lauren's pretentious art prints, now sported shelves lined with books I actually liked. We even hung up the dartboard Ryan had insisted on buying. When it was done, the house no longer felt like a shared space haunted by the past. It felt like a fresh start. That night, we sat on the couch, beers in hand, watching a basketball game. So, Ryan said, turning to me, what's the plan now? I shrugged. Honestly, I don't know. For now, I just want to enjoy the quiet. No drama, no games, just peace. Ryan nodded, raising his beer. Good call. But when you're ready, you know what you should do. What's that? Take a trip, he said. Get out of here, clear your head. Go somewhere you've never been. Just be. The idea stuck with me. The following week, I found myself scrolling through travel blogs during my lunch break, looking for inspiration. I didn't want anything flashy or exotic, just somewhere far away from the memories Lauren had tainted. Eventually, I landed on a small coastal town. It wasn't anything special, but it looked peaceful. That was all I cared about. The trip was everything I needed. I spent my mornings walking along the beach, the salty breeze clearing my mind in a way nothing else could. Afternoons were for coffee and a book at a quiet cafe. Evenings were for watching the sun dip below the horizon, the waves crashing against the rocks in a rhythm that felt oddly reassuring. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about Lauren. I wasn't replaying arguments in my head or imagining what I could have done differently. I was just living. One evening, I found myself sitting on a weathered bench overlooking the ocean, watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink. The air was cool, the kind of crisp that wakes you up without making you shiver. And for the first time, I didn't feel angry or bitter. I didn't feel like a victim. I just felt free. When I got back home, the house felt different. It wasn't just the furniture or the lack of Lauren's presence. It was me. I was different. I dove into work, threw myself into the gym, and started rebuilding my life piece by piece. I even made some new acquaintances at the gym. Nothing deep, just enough to remind myself that the world was bigger than the mess I'd just escaped. The best part? I didn't feel the need to prove anything to anyone. I wasn't trying to look like I was thriving for the sake of appearances. I was just living, and that was enough. A few weeks later, Ryan called to check in. "How's the post-Lauren era treating you?" he asked. "Better than I expected," I admitted. "The house feels like mine again. I took that trip you suggested, and honestly, I'm doing all right." Ryan laughed. "That's what I like to hear. So, when's the housewarming party? You know, to celebrate your Lauren-free life?" I grinned. "You'll be the guest of honor." That night, as I sat on my couch with a beer in hand, I realized something important. This wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of something better. Lauren's betrayal had broken me, but it hadn't destroyed me. I was still standing, stronger than I'd ever been. And for the first time in years, I wasn't living in the shadow of someone else's story. I was writing my own.